Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lawyers Who Stream, episode 5. Joining us today is Naomi Sayers, very exciting guest today. Naomi has a broad public law practice with a focus on indigenous law, gonna get all of them, indigenous law, administrative law, environmental law, energy and mining law, criminal law, and corporate law, serving clients in both Ontario and Alberta, and is frequently sought to comment on topics in the media. Naomi, welcome to the show. So great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
Start things off, I guess, at the beginning or as far back as you want to go. Tell us about where you went to law school and where you ended up articling, a little bit of your legal history.
Yeah, I went to U Ottawa.
Hmm.
I only applied to two law schools, so one Windsor, and I love Windsor, but I like when I go there, I get homesick because my
Hmm.
sister went to school there. So I think of like my family, and I was like, you know what, I don't think I'm gonna have a good time there. So I went to pick U Ottawa,
Okay.
and then also just I was doing a lot of advocacy,
Hmm.
so it just seemed just relevant to be there.
You were doing a lot of
Uh,
advocacy in Ottawa at the time.
Yeah, so just immediately, like prior to going to law school, I testified at Parliament. So Justice and Human Rights Committee
Hmm.
was the only Indigenous woman with sex trade experience to oppose Stephen Harper's bill.
Hmm.
And the things that I said, like, made it to media, and then media was like, come do this live interview like right after, and I was just like, oh my god, this is wild. Had absolutely no media training, so it was a little intense. Um, and learned a lot in the process, just how advocacy works, especially on Parliament and like lobbying.
Hmm.
So I went to U Ottawa, graduated 2017, and then I was offered articles at Hydro One. So at their main office in Toronto, I summered at Hydro One, and then they offered me articles because I liked summering there.
Hmm.
And I worked there for a year. Um, I liked it, but at the 1 year mark, I was like, I think I'm going to do something different, and I'm now on my own, and I love it. Um, I don't think we talk enough about how solos, like I'll admit, like I love browsing jobs and being like, oh, that looks like fun to apply to.
Hmm.
But this time it's not like, oh my God, I need another job and
Yeah.
applying to every single job. It's like, oh, that looks fun. Let's see if I meet the requirements and let's see if I get an interview. And it's not a big deal if I don't. And I'm building a skill if I do get it because I suck at interviews. And
I feel that. Yeah.
yeah.
I know what you mean, that experience of going solo. And you've been solo. Are you coming up on 1 year now for your home office, or you've been doing it more than a year?
So I left Hydro One in June 2019, and I like said publicly on Twitter, I was like, "Yay, I'm on my own now." But like at that time, I wasn't really like, "Okay, let's get clients," because I was still looking for work. And I was
Yeah.
like, but then January 2020 came around, and I was like, "Okay, work. I need to I need to bring in clients." So
Hmm.
that's was my goal from when I moved back home from August. I said, okay, have a business plan. So I worked on a business plan, got a grant, uh, January 2020, set up like a opening process, like how to come meet Naomi,
Hmm.
and then advertising, which was my goal just to get my name out there. And it worked,
Yeah.
locally anyways, because other small businesses were like, oh, hey, you're that lawyer lady from the radio. And I was like, yeah, that's me. So,
So the media appearances, that was kind of part of your bigger rollout at the beginning of 2020, sort of to get your name out there and everything. How did you find how did you go about sort of booking those appearances and doing that? What was sort of your plan?
so that was so that wasn't planned actually. What was planned was like the radio ads. So I had radio ads and newspaper ads,
Ads, okay. Hmm.
print and digital, and then I had some Facebook ads. I still haven't learned how to use that as well, because I know it's a skill. So I'm still somewhat like, oh, there's a class on Facebook ads, and I'm like, sign up if I can.
Hmm.
But in terms of the media stuff, anytime they came through, I was like, yes, I will take it. Yes. But how I got it was I would write and tweet about a lot of the things. So if they made it to the media and it was like something that was like um, of national importance or something, like I would tweet about whatever just came to my mind. Obviously, not whatever just came to my mind, respecting professionalism and all that. But one example would be the RCMP national manhunt for those two men who were serial killers,
Right. Yeah.
and the RCMP were like searching for them. I didn't want to use the word hunting.
Hmm.
Um, Searching for these men in First Nations territories,
Yeah.
but like they had almost, you could tell that they didn't have those good relationships with those First Nations, because if they did, they would have went directly to the First Nations and says, "Hey, can you get your trappers to help us? Can you let's roll this out. Let's roll out this process that that's based on our relationship."
Hmm.
I think at one point they did go to some communities and their like local trappers, who would know the land more than anybody else, who would know like where the swamps are, where like the trails are, which trail to take to avoid the swamps, and
Right.
where likely they would end up. So um, I tweeted up something, and I think it led to like a media interview in Toronto Star, and then I think there was some CTV media interviews
Hmm.
or some potential interviews, but they never played out. And I just said yes if I had the time. Sometimes you say yes, and the media says we found somebody else, and you're like, yeah, sure, no problem. But if that keeps happening over and over again, I just say just take me off the list, because clearly, like,
Don't bother me. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not a big deal. It's just like like you clearly have a list that you prioritize other people, and
Hmm.
I'm just gonna go focus on other things, right?
Yeah. The amazing thing these days, about social media and the way that we use it is if you have something important to say about topic, so the one that you just mentioned about this search for people in Indigenous territories, like if you have something important to say about it and you want to, you can just get it out there, and people tend to respond. People will amplify it, and that's great. It's a great way to make your name, and I think that really, for me at least, I found that a really great way for sole practitioners to empower themselves, and lawyers to empower themselves as professionals without needing to feel like they have to go into an organization like right away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
Hmm. So going back to your advocacy work on Parliament Hill, was that? I just wanted to pick that up because you mentioned it. I'm like, oh, that sounds
Yeah.
fascinating. Was that? So just remind me, was that sort of as you were thinking about going to law school, or would that precede that?
I think it uh like I was accepted to law school and it just happened. Like there was no like I want to do this type of advocacy.
Hmm.
I was writing about stuff and people were paying attention, and I was like participating in this lobbying group, this lobbying initiative, um, and they said that I I should probably be one of them to go, and I said sure. Um, but because I was the only Indigenous woman publicly doing it, like it came with a lot of backlash. So I didn't receive a lot of support, and some of the viewpoints I couldn't agree with any longer.
Hmm.
So I was like, I'm not feeling valued. I'm not feeling supported, and I'm gonna leave. So
Right.
it was short. It was probably maybe second year law school. So
Okay. Um, you sort of were. Was this as part of an organization or as in your individual capacity that you were testifying?
it was as a member of the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform. So I was a member of that group, and it just sex work advocacy is very white.
Yeah.
So, which a lot of things are.
Hmm.
And I could no longer support some of the things that they were saying, especially just publicly. So,
Right. It's just parted ways at that point.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, when you're so we sort of touched on it in your bio that you practice in a wide wide range of areas in your solo practice, which is awesome. And But what would you say is like, if you could kind of say like, what the cornerstone of your practice is, like what's sort of your main, the main way you approach taking cases, like what would you say that would be?
Hmm. If I had the capacity and if it sounds fun, and I don't mean fun in like, oh wow, this is like it's going to bring uh, like money or media or any more clients to me. I don't mean fun like that. I mean fun like, can I learn? I always learn something on a file, but can I contribute and help somebody in my role as a lawyer,
Mhm.
um, while also not hating the work. So, because I don't think we also talk enough about like, like I don't think that we can always love our work 100% like every single day.
Yeah.
Like today, I woke up late and I had a headache all day. Like, of course, I'm not gonna like the stuff that I'm doing today because don't. I want to sleep. So, but
Don't want to be
that,
doing any work. Doesn't matter what the work is. Just don't want to be here. Yeah,
yeah,
we've
it's
had
just,
days like that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so it's but there's also like things that I don't like about being a lawyer at all, right? Like I hate filling out forms, but I
Mhm.
don't want to hire a legal assistant to do that because I think they can do much more better things than fill out forms.
Yeah.
So
But if there's something sort of about the case or about the client that you think like, okay, there's potentially something interesting about this, or like potentially some fun to be had, like that's sort of the feeling you get when you take something.
yeah, and generally a lot of like the files I deal with are what we would call like low bono, and there's a lot of pro bono. I get a lot of referrals through the Law Society referral service.
Hmm.
That does result in some like clients who retain me and sometimes not. Um,
Right.
but I find what's generally helpful with those inquiries is actually directing the person to the right service, because a lot of the times it's more about they're not receiving the appropriate service.
Hmm.
So say they're low income and they need help with their landlord. Okay, there's probably a local legal clinic that they can be referred to,
Yeah.
or to think of like if they're a low income wage earner and they don't know how to make a complaint against their employer for like not properly supporting them in the workplace.
Hmm.
It doesn't cost money to file a administrative labor complaint, but you can only do that if you meet certain requirements. So a lot of the times it's just that, okay, why don't you try this? And then once you get the outcome of that, you can come back to me, because sometimes that will help your case. And then sometimes,
Yeah, I've definitely had calls like that. It seems like a lot of the time I'm just sort of a switchboard operator, like I, having to tell people, well, I can't really help you now, but go to these people and find out what they say, and then come back to me. And often they don't. Often, I don't really know what happens. Like sometimes they get the answer they want, sometimes, and they move on, or sometimes not. But yeah, it even that bit of legal knowledge, it's not the kind that will make you money necessarily, but it is helpful to people that call in, and that can be rewarding.
yeah,
Um, a couple questions from the chat coming in, that I'll just give them to you sort of as they come. This is live chat. If you're watching and want to ask a
nice.
question, go ahead. Um, all right. So from Dargan with four N's. How would you want your practice to evolve? What do you hope to do more of? What are you sort of lacking right now?
So my goal this year is to actually build my practice out west. That was my goal last year, but COVID, I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
pandemic.
not going to happen.
Yep.
So my goal is to do that this year and to just do what I did in Ontario, but do it in Alberta. So find a city where I can put some ads in to develop some ads, whether it's radio or digital,
Hmm.
and then try to. But it's hard when you're not actually there. So try to host like Zoom chats with me for people in Alberta. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't thought it through yet, but that's my goal, is to build it out west and to just try to be more resourceful in that way. So
Would you sort of, I mean, everything's sort of changed with COVID, with remote hearings being possible now, but initially were you sort of envisioning splitting your time between Ontario and Alberta, like flying over, having an office there, flying back, like that kind of thing?
yeah, because I love Alberta so much, and I know people are like, "How could you love Alberta? It's super conservative."
It's
if
not
you
all.
go, yeah, but if you go there and like you spend time with like the communities, everywhere you go, no matter what city you're in, it's always like the small town city vibe. And even
Yeah.
if you're in Calgary, it's like a community. There's a lot of community stuff happening. So
Hmm.
um, it's that's why I envision, and COVID was, I was like, okay, we'll adjust.
Did you live in Alberta for a while? Like, where's that love of Alberta coming from?
So I worked in Alberta for 2 summers, and I lived near High Level,
Okay.
so in a community called Chate. It's old, its old name. That's its traditional name. They were able to go back to its obviously traditional name,
Hmm.
but it was formerly known as Assumption, and it's like an hour south, maybe an hour and a half of the Northwest Territories border, and it's like absolutely beautiful.
Wow, yeah. Was it fly-in or is it roads or
No, it
connected?
was roads all the way up to High Level straight. High Level is like probably one of the like cities in that region and where everybody would go grocery shopping.
Hmm.
So, but there's a lot of like transports that go by. So like there's also high incidence of missing and murdered Indigenous women,
Mm.
sadly.
Yeah.
So
Is it what type of work were you doing there?
I was working with the youth. So living and working in the community and working with the youth. And that year there was a flood. Uh, our home, which was saved because we were on like this little tiny incline. Like if we weren't on the incline, I would have had to be been evacuated as well.
Yeah.
But my superiors were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this hill's
We're
protecting
chilling.
me." Yeah. So, and then not shortly after, there was also an oil spill, sadly,
Mm.
in its traditional territory. So they couldn't hunt or use that traditional territory for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And sorry, it like the thing was, it
Go ahead.
wasn't actually discovered. Like the community discovered it in its own monitoring, so it wasn't even like reported or anything. So
It's awful.
yeah.
Is that sort of that work with youth, is youth law something that you want to do as part of your practice? Do you miss that work at all?
So I have some youth clients. This is, I love my youth clients. I love the clients who come to me who are in these situations where I can help, you know, uh, help use law to help get them back on the right path or to help them come to a resolution. Um, Oftentimes, though, you know, a lot of the times it, it's challenging because you also have to communicate to the parent and say, look, like you can't be present, or if you're going to be present, here are the limitations.
Mm.
Here's what I need to get consent from the client who's your child.
Right.
Um, and oftentimes I have to make sure that like the parent isn't guiding the child's decision making, and that the child is, you know, it's like, okay, you understand what's happening here, right? And does you understand that
Mm.
you're making the decision and you're instructing me? So it requires different language and different, like, I guess, tests that we normally do. So like if I'm conversing with an adult client, right, I can be more direct. I can be like, look, like that's not okay. But like with a child, I'll say, okay, like, you know, different tone, different language.
Yeah, it's sort of different dynamics at play, and especially with the parent in the picture too. And there's some different duties and tests as well, right? Like if you're testing the
Mm-hmm.
capacity for a child, you gotta make sure that they're mature enough to make these decisions and take instructions from them and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What sort of do you have like a process to like make sure you're taking those steps, like a checklist when you're working with child with youth clients, or?
So I actually take notes. Um, and I prepare if I am concerned about something before meeting with any client. I
Mhm.
actually take notes prior to that, and I say like areas of concern. Um, and I don't try to make it like a structured conversation. So they're just there to remind myself that I actually have to ask the client these questions, or get these questions in, um, to make sure that I'm fulfilling my duties properly. So for a child, like a youth, it's, hey, just want to talk to you for a moment. I know that you're having a hard time remembering things, but maybe you had some time to remember since we last chatted. Remember how I said that you could take some time to think about some of the things that we talked about. Did you have some time to think about that?
Mhm.
And they sometimes say yeah or no, and if they say no, you say, okay, well, um, I just want to go through it with you again because it's really important, and we can't tell, other people the things, like we can't say you don't remember, right?
Yeah.
So, and then if they insist that they don't remember, which is fine. There's not much more you can do,
Yeah.
and you have to work around that.
Hmm. Yeah. Sort of. You're kind of limited by what they're willing to. It's not just what you think they know; it's what they are say that
Hmm.
they know. Yeah,
Hmm.
that can often be tough, I find.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but the good thing though is technology. Also, the bad thing is technology.
Double
They do a
edged.
lot of
Yeah.
yeah, they do a lot of things with
Hmm.
it. So you're like, okay, well, you don't remember. Sometimes you use your phone around this time. Did you use your phone? And it's like, bringing it through. So
Yeah, there might be messages going back, or photos, for
yeah,
sure. And yeah, that digital record. Do you find that comes up a lot when dealing with youth?
I a lot in my practice generally.
Or
So
in general, yeah, I guess it's kind of an everyone thing.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's actually been really helpful. Like especially if so how they say turn off your Google location or whatever. Sometimes clients say they weren't at a particular location at a particular time, and I say, okay, do you have a Gmail account? You say yes, and I say, can we look at your location services for that date? And they say sometimes it's on or it's off, and if it's on, then you say, okay, let's,
Mm,
I don't care about anything else. I say just get to that date and time.
yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah, we're carrying around snitches in our pockets all the time.
yeah,
Blessing Icarus. We're gonna go wrap up at around 7:30, if that's cool with you. But before we
sure.
go, I did promise that we would talk about your thoughts on pro bono work. Did you want to share?
Yeah, it actually irritates me so much whenever I see people like other lawyers, especially big city lawyers. Um, I won't say a particular city, but
How big? The biggest city?
the center of the universe, maybe,
Okay, yeah, no, we'll leave it at that. People know what we're saying.
are like, yeah, you should volunteer your time at this clinic. And it's like, I don't think people understand how lawyering happens outside the city. Like, there is a lot of pro
Mm,
bono work that I do, and a lot of what pro bono, low bono work that solo practitioners take on
yeah, for
day
sure.
in, day out.
Hmm.
So if you're a solo practitioner and you did your annual report and you have to look at how much pro bono hours you did, I did like I think close to 450 hours for the entire year. And
Yeah.
then so like I see big firms who are like, yeah, Jeff volunteers once a month at the clinic. I don't want to name a clinic, but you know, for
Yeah.
about an hour. And it's like, okay, does he get a certificate? I don't know. And I think we actually have to have really long conversations about how these firms are actually probably perpetuating the problem, not just because they're expensive, but because of actually they're how they accept pro bono cases. So
Mm,
generally in firms, there's usually like pro bono committee, or there's a policy about what kind of files I'll take on as a pro bono. And yes,
yeah.
same with my file too, right? Same with my office as well. But because I'm the only one answering the phone, I'm also the only one who is like, okay, uh, yes, I can deal with your matter right now. And I talk to them for like 10 minutes and deal with it right there. And then they're in and out of the door.
Hmm.
Um, but I also think that that infirm process where it's like um, they'll only take on certain files. It's like, okay, let's look at the culture around that and let's see how that is also perpetuating part of the problem. Um,
Yeah, it seems particularly self-serving if that's the way they're going about it. You know.
yeah.
Mm,
Um, and I have a policy now. Like I just don't do most files on contingency because contingency takes a really long time. Like
yeah.
almost all files that are potentially contingency are like 2 years out before you see anything. So it's like I would have to at least charge a minimum fee up front.
Mm,
And if that's you know I wouldn't mind doing that, but at the same time, the people who are requiring contingency are also not in a position to pay anything up front as well.
yeah. Yeah, I'm working on contingency too. Like you said, it can take a long time for that money to manifest. And if you're a sole practitioner who's just starting out, I mean, where's your cushion to kind of allow you to absorb that loss, right? It's going to cost you money to work it no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, no, the interesting the culture around pro bono is something I haven't had to really think about a lot. But I do know for a fact that every small firm, every solo practitioner lawyer, like does a lot of this work just as a in the normal course of things, right?
Yeah.
They don't talk about it, they don't brag about it. It's not like they need to set up any special rules or committee for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're onto something about kind of that culture, and I don't know. I'm not sure what's really to be done about it, but maybe just recognizing it is enough, I guess, if that's one thing we can take from this.
Yeah, and I think like we are reporting our pro bono hours,
Mm,
and if like um, big firms, I don't know how much one big firm lawyer does per year in pro bono hours, but um, or if it's inflated or not, because
mhm.
I don't know. Um, but 450 hours for one person, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So um,
I mean, what's the requirement for? Is there a minimum requirement at the LSO right now? Actually, I haven't looked in a while.
no, I just remember filling it out. I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to look at my hours and I'm going to look at the files and like, obviously we have to do that, but like,
Yeah.
I'm going to really get the accurate assessment
Hmm.
because I don't know where my time's being spent. Well, I know where my time's being spent, but is how can I assess this? And I don't think I'll change because I think that would make me really unhappy.
Yeah. Great. Well, Naomi, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. This video is going to be up on YouTube tomorrow if you want to look at yourself talk. I know some people like to do that. But next week, we're going to have Piper Thompson and Aaron O'Rourke off the Tracks podcast. I don't know if you've seen that floating around, but
Yeah,
they're
I want to listen to it.
yeah, they're hosting a legal podcast now, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and their sort of the work they're doing some interesting alternative stuff. So excited for that.
That's
Naomi,
great.
thanks again for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.